The location that you see before you is known as Hinata Manor, a gloomy place that's a decent drive from the nearby city. Its occupants consist of an elderly couple, the Hinatas, and their loyal servant, Satoko. The Hinatas are best described as a reclusive couple, even though they lived their lives in wealth and luxury. Unfortunately, our aged couple are far from enjoying their final days in happiness, mostly because of how a great deal of misfortune had befallen upon them, especially when their daughter, who's adopted, had just died, just a few months after being taken in by this couple. Another poor, innocent soul who fallen victim to this unfair world. It's true, a shadow lingers over this manor, a place that has an unseen horror that clings onto it like a cancer, something that is normally talked about amongst the people within the city. You see, it began with the several deaths of orphan girls. Because of the Hinatas being unable to have children of their own, they decided to adopt. For some unknown reason, every girl that is taken in by this couple ends up mysteriously dying. Even though the strange deaths caught the attention of the authorities, there was no evidence of foul play. Nobody knew how the girls died. However, just recently, a rumor has been going around the city. Someone speaking of terrible things that were happening within the walls of Hinata Manor. According to the rumor, the Hinatas would not only bully the girls, but would do disturbing things to them like biting them and sucking on their flesh, a ritual of some sort, to leech away the girls' youth and beauty. And eventually, the girls would end up dying from exhaustion because of this horrid act, and that the Hinatas were not only responsible for these strange deaths, but were able to escape justice because of Mr. Hinata's connection with the authorities. And even though it was just a rumor, a terrible one, it should be natural that the Hinatas are being viewed with suspicion. All those girls who died within the walls of that manor while under the care of the Hinatas. There's no way something like that can be a coincidence or an act of misfortune. But within the walls of this darkened manor, my friends, isn't a horror story about a disturbing couple who's scheming for their next victim, but a place of sorrow. A broken couple weighed down by the loss of another loved one. Every daughter that they've welcomed into their home, Miss Hinata loved each and every girl who was under her care, embracing that moment of happiness when experiencing a youth that she'd once enjoyed, until God's act of cruelty would take that happiness away. It's unfair that the several deaths of loving daughters would convince the Hinatas that they were cursed. The emotional toll was now too much to bear, that watching another girl fall victim to this strange phenomenon would only deepen their sorrow. And besides, the orphanage are now refusing to let the Hinatas adopt any more girls because of how many died while under their care. And even though Satoko, who's been working for the Hinatas for 30 years, tried her best to comfort the grieving couple, trying to bring a shred of happiness within the Hinata mansion, doing everything she can to ease Miss Hinata's grieving heart by filling in that role as a loving daughter. And even though the Hinatas were beyond grateful to have someone like Satoko within their lives, her admirable kindness and devotion, unfortunately, only a young girl can fill in that role, someone who would remind Miss Hinata of her young days, when she was once full of life and joy. And just when our cursed couple were convinced that their final days were going to be wasted away in grief and utter misery, it was upon a rainy night. The tragic day would dramatically change when Satoko discovered a young girl outside the garden, passed out. A miracle, my friends, that is about to brighten this darkened, gloomy manor with an unremitting horror. Thankfully, the girl hadn't suffered from anything serious after she was brought inside the manor and examined by a local physician, other than the strong possibility that she must have passed out from fatigue. According to the physician, the girl is perfectly fine. The Hinatas couldn't get over how beautiful she looked. Something about the girl that reminded Miss Hinata of her younger days when she was once beautiful. which is why the old woman immediately had this attraction towards the girl. When the girl had finally awakened, being greeted by the Hinatas, anticipating to find out how she ended up in their front yard during such a stormy night. Well, her name is Tomie, and her story was quite tragic. The poor girl had just lost her parents in a plane crash yesterday, and since then she'd been wandering through the city nearby until it started raining, and somehow ended up at this manor. And even though Mr. Hinata was a bit cautious about this situation, the Hinatas couldn't deny the fact that a beautiful young girl with no family, no home, ended up in their loving care. That after the horrible events of losing so many loved ones, Miss Hinata was strongly convinced that this may be the miracle they needed, that it was fate that brought Tomie to their front doorstep. And well, that was when Tomie was welcomed into the Hinata family as a loving daughter. Thankfully, it didn't take long before Tomie was officially adopted as a member of the Hinata family. Oh, how the Hinatas found true happiness with Tomie's charming and warming personality, her very presence lifting the cloud of darkness from their manor. It didn't even take long before Tomie began referring Miss Hinata as Mother, something that truly made the old woman shed tears of joy, that this beautiful young girl would accept her as a loving, wonderful mother, a role that Miss Hinata is more than willing to fulfill. Tomie was truly a blessing for these people, which is why Miss Hinata promised to do anything for her beloved Tomie, buy her daughter anything she wants. And when Tomie immediately asked for a diamond ring, so much like Miss Hinata during her younger years, a beautiful young woman with expensive taste, which is why Miss Hinata promised to buy her daughter the biggest diamond she could find. However, not everything within the mansion was in high spirits. For some reason, Satoko couldn't shake away this suspicion she had with Tomie, that there was something about the girl that was not right. It is strange how the girl claimed that her parents died in a plane crash, when Satoko doesn't remember overhearing anything about it. Basically, Satoko was very uncomfortable with Tomie's presence, especially with her arrogant personality, wasting no time on hounding Satoko with trivial expectations for exquisite foods and services, that the Hinatas were completely blind on the fact that they just adopted a despicable princess that never shied from threatening Satoko's job for her lazy performance as a servant. Now, with the mansion walls being filled with joy and happiness, you can easily understand how the Hinatas are completely oblivious to every suspicion that Satoko had with their new daughter. Finally getting the opportunity to spoil the girl with gifts and the finest luxuries, Miss Hinata embraced every moment with Tomie, finally getting the chance to style her hair and seeing her daughter with lavishing dresses that reminded the elderly couple of the years when Miss Hinata was once young and beautiful. Oh, how the old couple enjoyed watching their beloved princess embrace her new, luxurious lifestyle, a scene that truly warmed Miss Hinata's heart. The Hinatas were not only proud parents of a beautiful princess, but were fully convinced that they can spend their final years in happiness. However, when the time came where Miss Hinata spoiled her daughter with a diamond ring, which was promised, the old woman couldn't shake away this inner guilt, that even though the Hinatas were finally happy, there was still a lingering cancer, a terrible secret that Miss Hinata just couldn't keep hidden away from their newest member of the family, which is why the old woman finally broke into tears and confessed the dark history behind this place to her beloved Tomie. And even though Tomie comforted her mother, eased her pains and fear of losing another loved one, as the old woman shared the story of how she and her husband lost so many daughters, that was when Tomie had also confessed something as well. Before she was found passed out in the front lawn, when wandering through the city streets, there was talk about this place. Horrible rumors that made people assume that there was something evil happening behind the walls of this mansion, sharing stories of an elderly couple who would bully the orphan girls to death, envious of their youth, sucking on their skin like leeches. Such an awful rumor, having Miss Hinata wonder who would say such a cruel and terrible thing. So I wonder who would ever go around saying such a terrible thing. A nasty rumor that's obviously not true. Or is it? Because that night, after Tomie and her new mother had a little heart-to-heart, there was something souring the happiness of this family, and it was something that Tomie had to share with Poppy. Yes, Mr. Hinata was truly blessed to see his wife in uplifting spirits. Because of Tomie, she hasn't had any trouble sleeping, but there were secrets that Tomie had been keeping from her father, and she didn't know how to come forward with them. But Tomie just could not carry on without letting Mr. Hinata know of the horrendous things that were happening within the manor. And as Tomie broke into tears, shocking Mr. Hinata with a pitiful scene before showing the bruises that riddled her arms, Tomie had tried everything she could to keep the abuse a secret, but she could no longer take it. The unspeakable things that her mother was doing to her, the abuse, the envious hate that Miss Hinata had for Tomie because of her beauty, her youth, doing such perverted things like sucking on her skin, chasing the poor girl throughout the manor with this maniacal look, shouting things like how she wanted to be young again. That Tomie doesn't deserve that youth. And even though Mr. Hinata could not understand what was happening, that even with the bruises and the terrified daughter crying before him, the old man just couldn't accept the idea that his wife would do such an ungodly thing. He'd known her for over 40 years. There was no way Mr. Hinata can believe such a thing. It had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding or something. But Tomie was persistent that she was being abused, which is why the following day, Tomie is going to prove that there are horrible things happening within this manor. Tomie. Such a beautiful looking young lady. All the boys that are going to chase after her love, become the envy of all women. It is truly a blessing to be Tomie's mother. Styling her daughter's hair was a moment that Miss Hinata embraced the most. So what would it be for today? Braid it or curl it? Miss Hinata always enjoyed this moment, wondering why Tomie looks more beautiful by the day. Her hair, her hands, with skin so white that Miss Hinata could just give in to this crazy, forbidden idea, this inner temptation. And that was when Miss Hinata immediately attacked Tomie when biting her arm, trying to suck on her flesh. And with Tomie trying to free herself from Miss Hinata, to fight off her own mother as the old woman continued sucking on Tomie's flesh, it was when Mr. Hinata bursted into the room, demanding his wife to stop this disgusting act. And as Miss Hinata had finally came to her senses, and realized what had just happened, the reality of what had just happened. It was quite the horror show for the frightened woman when watching her own husband berate her for this perverted act. Confused, overwhelmed with fear and shame for attacking Tomie. That, my friends, was when the happiness in this family had died. After what had just happened, it wasn't an easy night for the Hinata family. Miss Hinata was now a broken woman, not an ounce of happiness within her, weighed down with grief and shame. What happened was something that was unlike Miss Hinata. She would have never think of doing something so heinous, especially towards somebody she loves. And yet, she did it. And nobody believed her pleas, her innocence in all this. Her husband, who's deeply ashamed of his wife, had stopped talking to her, and her daughter was now terrified. She did not mean to attack Tomie. It was ever since the girl talked about them horrible rumors. Miss Hinata was afraid that the rumors would become a reality. It was an obsessive thought that stuck with Miss Hinata's mind like a cancer, which kept growing bigger, stronger by the day. And the more Miss Hinata kept telling herself, "Don't do it," the less she could resist these urges. And there was nobody who believed Miss Hinata's reasons for her vile act. Nobody except Satoko. Since the day Tomie was brought into this house, Satoko strongly felt that there was something not right with the girl. The story of her parents dying in the plane crash. When Satoko looked into it, there was no report or anything. And the fact that Tomie mysteriously ended up in their front lawn and would go out of her way to share the horrible rumors that are talked about within the city, wouldn't be surprised if it was Tomie herself who was the one that started the rumors. Fact is, there is something definitely wrong with this Tomie, as if she's up to something. And even though Miss Hinata was happy that there was at least somebody who believed her, strongly fearing the loneliness when knowing that Tomie would be leaving because of what happened, the horror of seeing the rumors become a reality, that was when Miss Hinata apologized to Satoko, admitting her guilt for not seeing the fact that Satoko was always there for her. But after the incident with Tomie, and the grief that was endured after every girl who died within Miss Hinata's care, the old woman was truly blessed to have Satoko within her life, and finally realized that it should have been her that she would proudly call daughter. And that was when Miss Hinata said that she would like to officially adopt Satoko into the Hinata family as her loving, caring daughter. Finally happy to see a sign of joy within her mother, regardless of the hardship that awaits, rebuilding the damages that were done by that horrendous girl. Satoko was fully confident that her family were going to overcome this by finally getting rid of Tomie. But when Satoko returned with her mother's request for a glass of water, she was not prepared for the horrible sight within her mother's room. That night, Miss Hinata was found dead. The old woman just could not face the horrible future that awaited, which is why Miss Hinata had committed suicide. Now, even though Satoko was officially adopted into the Hinata family, which was Miss Hinata's final wish before she died, life within the manor was far worse than Satoko imagined. Regardless of the fact that Satoko was now a member of the Hinata family, Satoko still fulfilled her duties as a loyal servant, forced to endure Tomie's verbal bullying, her constant demands and lashing out against Satoko because of her incapability to fulfill such unrealistic expectations. 6 months, Satoko had endured the abuse and bullying of this vile wench, all because of how she was a humble and timid woman. It's been 6 long months, and yet there's still no effect. No signs nor symptoms of Tomie's health diminishing. Since the first day, Satoko had been dropping small amounts of poison into Tomie's food, to where it's untraceable. The girl should have died 3 months ago, like all the others. How is it possible that Tomie is still alive? At this rate, Satoko will end up losing her chance of seizing the family fortune, which is why she has to find an alternative method to remove Tomie from the family. How poetic. It was on a rainy night when Tomie was found, and now it's going to be on a rainy night when Satoko will finally take care of this cancerous girl through strangulation. Of all the girls who were brought into this family, you can say that something like Tomie definitely has it coming. But when sneaking into Tomie's bedroom, ready to do the unthinkable for that family fortune, Satoko was not prepared for the shocking scene that awaited within Tomie's room. It was Mr. Hinata, who was on top of Tomie's blood-covered body, stabbing the deceased girl repeatedly. It was like the old man was in a trance or something, completely fixated on driving the kitchen knife into Tomie's destroyed body. And when Satoko interrupted the grisly scene, trying to make sense of what was happening, it was like Mr. Hinata was playing it off as a normal thing. It's been a couple hours since Tomie died. For some strange reason, the old man had this urge to kill Tomie, but when seeing the shock on Satoko's face, the fear of an old man covered in blood and clenching a kitchen knife, Mr. Hinata assumed that Satoko would have understood the situation, thought that she would have believed him, just like she believed his wife. But with Satoko trying to flee the manor, her attempt to make her way to the authorities and disgrace the family name had failed. It was upon that terrible night when Mr. Hinata had violently killed one of his daughters, a woman who had proudly served the Hinata family for over 30 years before she was officially adopted into the family. After killing Satoko, Mr. Hinata had killed himself. The city was shocked by the horrible crime that had just taken place within Hinata Manor, sharing a story that confirmed that the rumors were in fact true. The elderly couple were responsible for the deaths of many orphan girls. However, there was a survivor, an orphan who not only managed to escape with their life, but lived to tell the horrendous tale of what truly happened within Hinata Manor, and also be the surviving member of the family who inherited the family fortune.